Recording has started. There we go. All right. So welcome everyone to tonight's book seminar. I have the honor with me today to present Torbjörn Hansen. So he will do a lecture in about 30 to 40 minutes, I think, and then we will have an open discussion. But I will start with introducing myself and the Swedish Society for Philosophical Practice. So my name is Christopher Ring, and I'm the responsible for these online book seminars. And I work with the Swedish Society for Philosophical Practice. It's a non-profit, religiously and politically unbound organization that has the vision to spread knowledge and the practice of philosophical dialogue in society. And we are operating in different sectors, such as healthcare, school, and also caretaking, I think it's called. And we have a lot of activity. We have these book seminars online, and we have educations and trainings in philosophical practice. We also arrange a lot of philosophical cafes that you can find online. And everything that we do, you can find at ssfp.se, our homepage, which I will link in the chat soon. And we have other book seminars and trainings and the Nordic conference in Gothenburg coming up. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. But today, or tonight, Torbjörn Hansen will talk about existential practical phenomenology. And he is a professor at the institution of Aalborgs University, I think it's called, Aalborg. You're a very experienced philosopher working with philosophical counseling. I think the translation is right. But I will let you introduce yourself and your work. So the stage is yours, Finn.
Okay. And thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. I've been looking forward to do that. And yeah, my name is, maybe I should just, because I have some slides, and then I will be talking, 40 minutes. Let's see. Should I share? There you go. I think this should be it.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Right. Yeah. So I'm working as a professor of applied philosophy at Aalborgs University, and I'm also head of a research unit called TEN, Time, Existence, and Nature Connectedness. So we are trying to see also the connection between a more existential sustainability, a notion of existential sustainability, and existential health, and how can philosophical practice, and especially a more phenomenological, wonder-oriented approach, maybe create a new way of thinking in health humanities and environmental humanities. That's some of our research topics. But let me tell a little bit about, you can say that the first thing I wanted to focus on is that why is this, I can see that am I the only one who can admit people into the to this? Because there's coming up persons who wants to be.
Yeah, I can admit that thing.
Okay, great.
No problem.
Right. Yeah. So and my background in philosophical practice is that I was the first to write a PhD dissertation about philosophical counseling and how it could be used in adult learning back in 2002. And in 2003, I think it was, I founded the Danish Society for Philosophical Practice. And later, I also started master courses in philosophical counseling, which was going on from 2004 to 2012. And so right now, I'm just a board member in the Danish Society of Philosophical Practice, but And David Larsson is the head of the Danish Society now, and he's doing very well, and lots of activities is going on as well in Denmark, and I can hear that you too in Sweden are doing that, so it's nice to hear that. But let me go on. The 4 epochal challenges of today, and why philosophical practice is important when looking at those 4 epochal changes of today. The first one is, of course, the global climate crisis and the cry of the planet. So in what way can philosophical practice help us to listen to this cry, and maybe also to have another kind of connection or resonance with nature, or with what we maybe should call not nature but physis, in the Greek word of notion of nature as physis, which is more than what nature scientists are focusing on. It's something that has much more to do with being as such. And I think we have some interesting ways of working with philosophical practice, especially when we talk about and we work with wonder, the sense of wonder, that if we can cultivate a sense of wonder, we might also cultivate a kind of existential resonance with physis. So I think we should be working with eco-phenomenology and eco-philosophy as well as philosophical practitioners. And not being in resonance, or not being connected to nature, the inner nature and the outer nature, so to speak, also I think has to do with the burnout society and the cry of the human soul, you can say. So we need to find a kind of combination between health humanities and environmental humanities. There are something going on between those distinct research fields where we can maybe create some bridges. I hope so. And then, of course, we have this great AI thing. Are we going to be, how do you say, left back in the line, and there will be going on? And what is it really that we human can, that the machines can do? Of course, this is a main issue, and we should, as philosophical practitioners, be really working on this field. And I think that working with wonder and working with Socratic dialogue can maybe strengthen our discernment or our ability to think for ourselves, or at least to think in a way that brings us to what the AI and the machine cannot, in the kind of algorithm language, cannot really grasp. So maybe there's something in the philosophical language as well as the artistic language which can open up for a sensing of the world, maybe even a metaphysical kind of sensing, which cannot be grasped by an algorithm. And should this be also a way of thinking that we as philosophical counselors should rely on or cultivate, and how should we do that? And at the last thing, the fourth, is of course democracy, and how can we cultivate both a critical reflection but also a loving attention, a kind of way of listening to what is really our longing, and how can we, through democracy and communities, create a language which is helping both individuals and different kinds of communities. So in ways, I like to have those 4 challenges in front of me when I talk about what's the bigger issues for philosophical practice. Let's see if I can. Oh, it's freezing. Oh, yeah, good. Right. So these are some of the books. Unfortunately, these are only in Danish. But I will later show you some articles, which is, and also a book, which is in English on these topics. But in 2000, I wrote the first philosophical book on the Socratic dialogue groups and how to facilitate it. And I was trained in this kind of philosophical counseling and Socratic dialogue groups. And it was the first book in Denmark about it. And my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, was it's called The Philosophical Life, a Bildungideal, or educational ideal for existential pedagogic is the undertitle. And here I'm presenting and discussing what philosophical counseling, what philosophical practice is, and I connect it to different kind of art of existence, first through Michel Foucault and his idea of ethical self-care. And later, in another chapter, I go on with a more postmodern view on this kind of thinking through Richard Rorty. But from the third chapter and further on, I'm critical towards a too aesthetical and, a too aesthetical and relativistic approach. So at my view is a more Kierkegaardian and Wittgensteinian view on what a philosophical life is. And I especially connect to Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, when he talks about not the ironist, but the humorist as a kind of educational ideal. And this is what I connect to philosophical practice, and also connect to adult education and how one could bring in philosophical practice in a more broader sense. So the other books are books where I'm more going into a research mindset. In the book from 2008, I see how philosophical practice can be used on teacher educations, and also, I use a lot of energy and pages on Hannah Arendt and Life of the Mind, and how her thinking about Socrates and Socratic meiotic can be very useful and very, very much in line, I think, with the Kierkegaardian way of understanding what is going on in the Socratic dialectics and meiotics. And then I started to do action research, that is going away from the chair, the philosopher chair, and out in the practice, and was invited to do action research with some designers on a design school. And it was in 2010, 11, 12 that I, in this group of designers, also developed what I today call a Wonder Lab. And this kind of Wonder Lab is a way to first have a phenomenological touch, being phenomenological in tune with a phenomenon, starting from a phenomenological momentum, so to speak. And then after having a lived experience, which could be, let's say, hope, then we move on to a more hermeneutic, Socratic questioning, where we ask, what's the tacit assumption taken for granted in the lived experience? And after being there for a while, at least when we start to having a sense of a more philosophical wonder connected to this lived experience, we move on to the third momentum, which is the momentum where we bring in the great or the grand stories of humanity, poetry, art, philosophy, and so on, to elevate into higher horizons. And after that, the fourth momentum is the existential one. So here I ask, who and where are you in all these great thoughts, and how do you connect these great thoughts to your own life? And then the last momentum of there are five. The last one is the phronesis, the practical wisdom. So what kind of practical wisdom did we as a group learn from our wonder journey, so to speak? So this is the Wonder Lab, very shortly described, and you can read much more about that in books also in English, if you want to do that. But this is what I started doing on a design school. And the book from 2008 and also from 2014 was pretty much read in Denmark. And one day I was contacted by a hospice at the North Sea. And they said, we have read your book, At stå i det åbne, to stand in the openness. from 2008. And we think that we experience that when we are in an existential moments with our patients or relatives on a hospice, we have difficulties of being there. So can this kind of community of wonder, this kind of wonder-based dialogue, could that maybe be another way of strengthening existential health communication? That was the question. And it was, again, an action research project, which I did for 3 years at the hospice and learned a lot from them. It was amazing how they work and how all their reflections and so on. And in 2018, I was invited to a public organization, a community, how do you say, in kommune, where there was an innovation department. And here the question was, we have been talking a lot about the learning organization. Couldn't we now talk more about the wonder organization? So the wondering organization. So we can put much more focus on the meaning dimension and more on the existential dimension of on a workplace. So here we developed what I today call wonder-based innovation, which is a kind of meaning-driven innovation, which is not the same as user-driven innovation or technology-driven innovation. And lastly, in 2022, my wife is Anne-Charlotte Thorsted, and she is a researcher in play and playfulness and in innovation and how aesthetical thinking and playfulness can be used in higher education and also in organization when wanting to innovate. And she's a phenomenologist, of course, like me. And in this book, which is called tänka med hjärtat, to think with the heart, an introduction to existential practice phenomenology, we really take, in many ways, the thinking of not just Husserl, but also Heidegger and Marion. So the purpose of this book, in a way, is not just to give a basic introduction to phenomenology, but it is to give a three-dimensional approach to phenomenology, where you say that, well, on the one hand, you can approach a phenomenon in the Husserlian way, which is, at least seen from a Heidegger perspective, a much more epistemological or knowledge-oriented approach. So in a way, we have three dimensions. The first is the knowledge dimension, which is typically the way that Husserlian phenomenologists approach a phenomenon. And then you have the being dimension, which is the more existential dimension, which Heidegger and so on, the existential phenomenologists, and the way they approach a phenomenon. And then we have the Marion and other thinkers in the more ethical kind of phenomenology, also the Danish philosopher and phenomenologist Løgstrup, K.E. Løgstrup. And here it is not being as such or knowledge, it is more like the mystery, seeing the phenomenon as a living mystery, which even can talk back and even give back, meaning giving, not just us, so to say, it's not just a meaning making approach, but it's more like a meaning receiving approach when we talk with this more ethical kind of phenomenology. So like you have in a room, there's three dimensions, and the same when you approach the phenomenon, we would say there are three dimensions: the knowledge, the being, and the mystery dimension. And this is a basic idea we unfold or we develop in this book. So that's one important aspect of the book. Another important aspect in this book is to say that the way we approach a phenomenon, if we want to go from a knowledge-oriented approach to a more being and mystery-oriented approach to the phenomenon, we need to go like if we have two legs or two wings, so to speak. The first leg is the aesthetical, playful leg, or playful or lyrical wing, and the other wing or leg is the Socratic philosophical leg. So this is a very important approach that we need to have when we try to get into an existential phenomenological reflection, or maybe reflection is not a good word, maybe better thinking or dwelling. Dwelling would be even better word. So if you want to go into an existential phenomenological dwelling towards a phenomenon, you need to be grasped first by the phenomenon, and this is where we can learn a lot from the aesthetical or the artist or the phenomenological approach, whereas the more Socratic dialectical thinking is also needed and also very important. So we can think also critical towards what is coming up in our moods and in our emotions and all that when we are touched by an art piece or whatever. So having both is a kind of balance where we can, and through these two legs, we can walk into and go into the journey of and out in a more, how do you say, wonder motivated, or wonder wonder-fueled reflection or thinking. But let me move on. So besides this book, To Think with the Heart, we also do some thinking in another Norwegian published book, in fact, and we are now, there was 5 researchers who did this book, Phenomenology, and the undertitle is To Live, to Conversate, and to Write Towards the Enigmatic in Life. So the idea here, very shortly mentioned, is that it's not enough as a phenomenologist just to sit in your armchair, to do your thoughts and thinking and meet the phenomenon in your armchair. You need also to meet people, other people, and maybe the phenomenon really will first start to emerge in a dialogue where you are not just writing about it, but where you are having a living dialogue about it. So here we are, in fact, following Gadamer. Gadamer, when he is saying that the living dialogue is on a higher or deeper ontological level than writing. And I know that Derrida and Gadamer is of course in a discussion, and why is it that the living word and the living dialogue is on a higher level, ontological speaking, than the writing? And this is an interesting thing, but for us it's much more to say that, well, don't just be writing, really try also to have in a group and also among phenomenologists that respect what is happening in the living conversation. And then the last level is to live your way out into the phenomenon. So if you really want to get in touch with the phenomenon, in resonance with the phenomenon, you have to live it. And we are talking about that in this book. And then in the last book, or the latest book, the most recent book, is called Wonder, Silence, and Human Flourishing Toward a Rehumanization of Health, Education, and Welfare. And this is a group of, we were 9 researchers from the Netherlands, from Norway, and from Denmark, where we, in different ways, show why we think that this kind of wonder-based thinking can raise and can rehumanize our thinking in education and so on. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this book as well. So if you read it, and also if you read At tænke med hjärtat, please send me a note. I will be appreciated. But what we miss in the book, Wonder, Silence, and Human Flourishing, I would say today, is that we are focusing only there on the rehumanization. But what about the more than human? So the next book we should be writing, and we are writing on such a book, is in what way can we not only focus on human flourishing, but also more than human life flourishing, and how is the relation between wonder, the sense of wonder, and this kind of approach to nature and the life around us. In the little book at the left is called væredygtighed, eller værekraft, and you can translate that into existential sustainability. So we are working with this notion of existential sustainability. What could that be? And here, I can send you the, oh no, you will have the video, but I could send you the PowerPoint as well as a PDF if you want to have that. But here you can see different approaches, my latest research, and one of the article, for example, is called Love and Wonder, the amazing relation between wonder and love. And that this is something that really is intriguing for me. Why is it that when we really are in deep contemplative wonder, it seems like we are more listening with our hearts rather than with our minds? And why is that? How can we philosophical and phenomenological understand this kind of relation between love and wonder? And in another book, which is coming up, it's called, the book is called The Playful University. In that, I have a chapter which is called On the Strange Relation Between Play and Wonder. And then again, I'm really wondering why it is that when we are in a playful mood, it seems like we are opening up to a relation to the world, which is letting us see the world in a more or let us see the wonders in the world. Why is that? Why is that this can happen? And then we have a lot. I have a much more academic articles focusing on how can, for instance, action research be qualified through this kind of wonder-based thinking. And if I go more into the understanding of wonder, I would say today, and maybe in a year or two, I will end another place. But right now, I'm very fascinated by the so-called apophatic tradition. An apophatic tradition is something that is connected to what we call negative theology, or negative ontology, or negative epistemology. And negative ontology and negative theology is about that you cannot, with the human language, with the human thoughts and concepts and discursive theories and so on, really grasp what is most basic or most elementary and most meaning-giving for us in our life. So how can you approach that, like love, like beauty and so on, in a way that you are not harming the phenomenon or the living mystery of what love is, or what hope is, or the existential life phenomenon? And of course, I would say, of course, Søren Kierkegaard is an apophatic thinker, in his indirect communication and in his existential dialectics, where he again and again show how we should undermine, through a kind of Socratic thinking, our thoughts in order to get out in the open. And when we come out in the open in a kind of emptiness, in a kind of Gelassenheit that you let go, then you might be open enough or empty enough to receive what you cannot receive through concepts and language in a more discursive, logical way. So this kind of apophatic thinking I'm very interested in. And in the book, At tænke med hjerte, to think with your heart, I'm talking about that, but in a more non-academic way, a more popular way, so people, so not people, but students can get a sense of it. Yeah. So what is being in deep contemplative wonder? Why is it good for higher education or ethical self-care, and also care for the more than human life? Well, I would again say that there's many reasons, and I cannot give you, I don't have time to go through it, but this is a slide you can read later maybe, and you can see that there are many references, ways of going into this kind of thinking. You can see it at the end of the points. I'm talking about, again, aesthetical and philosophical wonderment as a kind of soul nurturing and spirit strengthening. I call it A and P, aesthetical and philosophical wonder, enhanced Bildung, education, liberal education. And I think this is a very important thing that we as philosophical practitioners can do, can create a space for, at least, to create this kind of moments or communities of wonder. One of the things that I'm doing right now as a researcher, as an philosophical action researcher, is working on a hospital in Aalborg. And there they are doing some very interesting work. You may know that already in Sweden, because I know that people in Sweden have been working on this kind of thinking for many years, and also in Norway and England. But the thing is that when you have cancer, or when you are in a grief, sorrow and grief, well, then you need a doctor, maybe some medicine, maybe you need a psychologist, and maybe you need also a priest to talk about more existential or religious questions. But what is coming up now is that maybe also art and the philosopher could be a good conversation partner. So I've been working for now 2 years, 1.5 years, with artists and also nurses and doctors on this hospital, where we have created what we call culture power, kulturkraft. And there, the way we do it, or at least right now, is that we ask a group of cancer patients and their relatives to join and experience a very beautiful art experience, for instance, some music or an art exhibition or whatever. And here it's not therapists who are art therapists and so on who are talking with them, but it's artists or people who love the art, but they are not focusing on the people as people who are sick or having trouble, psychological trouble or whatever. They're just looking at the other person as another person. And the joy of just having a talk around this art piece is of course good. But we have discovered, and this is in fact what I have been working on and developing, that if we can take people from an art experience where they're still in tune with it, grasped by it, and if you can take this kind of mood, this kind of atmosphere of being grasped by an art piece, and take it over into an existential and philosophical conversation, then something is happening in the group, or in the, let's say, a group of 4, or how many groups we are creating in this kind of session. And this is what I have been developing as what I today call a wonder compass. And at the end of my speech, which should be ending very soon, then I will show you how we develop, how we work with this kind of wonder compass. So I will be running through some slides now. This is just to say that there's a lot of books about wonder, the phenomenology of wonder, the ethics of wonder, the philosophy of wonder. But when I've been doing a state of the art on all these kind of different research approaches to wonder, I'm I'm searching for not just a psychological or philosophical, analytical approach to wonder, but more also an existential, contemplative. So this is why we have been developing some of the books on a more contemplative way of thinking wonder. So one of the things that you could ask is that, for instance, is wonder a feeling, an emotion? Like when Martin Buber, the dialogical philosopher Martin Buber, when he talks about love, he would say that feelings accompany the metaphysical and psychological facts of love, but they are not constituted it. But they do not constitute it. Feeling we have, love happens. Feeling dwells in man, but man dwells in his love. And I think this is extremely interesting because it helps us to see that we shouldn't be focusing too much on feeling. Well, psychologists are good at that, and they should do that. But as philosophers, at least as existential phenomenologists, we are not much more focused on love or another phenomenon as something in itself that we can be part of, that we can, that the phenomenon more become a kind of ontological event that happens to us. And if we think about wonder and love and things like that as an event that happens to us, then we approach it in a much more humble, I would say, way, an open way. Yeah. I think I should do something now technically. I stop sharing, and because I have to move to the last slide. I have to have too many slides. Let's see. Boom. And then I will share again when I'm done that. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to show you something here because I work with what I call the 3 dimensions in the phenomenology of wonder. As I started, I talked about the knowledge dimension, the being dimension, and the mystery dimension. And if you go into the phenomenology of wonder, you could ask from the start, okay, what is the difference between being curious, being interested, being examining, and then being in wonder? Or what is the difference between being surprised or amazed and so on? And all those different kinds of ways of being, it's not the same as being in wonder. So what is really being in deep contemplative wonder? And how do you make a distinction, for instance, between scientific wonder and philosophical wonder? And scientific wonder, I would say, is knowledge seeking, and it's explaining and reason seeking wonder. Whereas what philosophical wonder is, like philosophy, it's the love of wisdom. So it's wisdom seeking wonder, but it may also be a kind of loving seeking wonder. If we follow Levinas, for instance, when he talks about that real philosophical practice is not just the love of wisdom, but it's the, how do you say it? He's saying it's the practice of love in the service of love. So when you're really in deep wonder, or when you're really in deep philosophizing, you are getting into a loving relation with the world. I think this is, again, something mysterious or enigmatic between love and wonder, which we could talk about maybe. So you can also get take this kind of thinking, the knowledge dimension and the being dimension and the mystery dimension, and let Heidegger, at least with late Heidegger, talk about the different kinds of ways of approaching. But we do not have time for that, so I will end now by the model of the compass, the wonder compass. And it's, of course, very simplistic, put up here, and I've been writing much more about it, and I'm writing on a book right now, which is called Existential Health Communication as an Aesthetical and Philosophical Practice. And this is where I really unfold what I mean by this kind of compass. But the idea, and this is the compass which I also use when I'm on the hospital with cancer patients and so on. So after they have had this art experience, this experience with music, for instance, we meet in West, And when we start in West, it is because there we start with a lived experience. This is the phenomenological moment. And then we go north and look for the values. What kind of tacit assumptions and tacit values is taken for granted in the lived experience? And they discuss that, and they choose a value which is the most, for them, the most important. And then you go from north to east, and there you in east you meet Socrates, and they learn some Socratic tricks to ask critical questions, and also teasing questions and dialectical questions to their the persons in the group. And by doing that, they discover that the kind of sureness, the kind of certainty they had was maybe not so certain anymore. So they get into an increasing kind of community of wonder. And when you go from east to south, then you are asking people to reflect on, okay, this kind of thinking, where does it lead you? What kind of practical wisdom, and how do you live your thinking in your own life? And this is, you can say, well, it's very similar to the 5 momentum, which I started by talking about in the Wonder Lab. But this is a model, or pedagogical model and metaphor, which seems to be much more easy for people to work with, I have discovered. Time is out. It's 40 minutes, so I will stop here. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, Finn. I will now stop the recording.